A homeless man went to bury his dog and found oil. What he did next. Daniel Matthew felt his hands tremble as he held the makeshift shovel made from an old can tied to a broom handle. At 22, he was accustomed to the pain of hunger and cold, but nothing had prepared him for that farewell. The young man with messy brown hair looked at the small, still body of Thunder, the yellow mutt that had been his companion for 3 years on the streets of New York City. The animal had been hit by a car in the early hours of the previous morning while trying to protect Daniel from some boys who wanted to steal his cart of recyclable materials. The vacant lot behind the old neighborhood church seemed the most appropriate place to give a dignified farewell to the only true friend he had in the world. Daniel had arrived there at sunrise, carrying the animal's body wrapped in an old blanket they always used to keep warm during cold nights. He began to dig slowly, each movement of the shovel echoing like a muffled sob. The ground was harder than he expected, mixed with rubble and old roots. His clothes, already dirty from so much time on the streets, became even dustier as he struggled to dig a decent hole. The skinny young man had ended up on the streets after his mother died, from complications of a prolonged illness. With no other known relatives and no money to pay the rent for the small room where they lived, Daniel found himself completely alone in the world. That's when he met Thunder, still a puppy, abandoned in a cardboard box near a hospital. Since then, they had been inseparable. The dog accompanied him during the long days of collecting recyclable materials, slept with him in stairwells or under awnings, and always shared with Daniel any food they managed to find. Thunder had a special knack for sniffing out where they might find some leftover food or a safer place to spend the night. As he dug, Daniel remembered all the times the animal had protected him. Thunder would bark when ill-intentioned people approached during the night, stood guard while Daniel slept, and even comforted him with affectionate licks on the most difficult days. The dog seemed to understand perfectly when his owner was sad or worried. The shovel hit something different in the soil. Daniel stopped for a moment, thinking he had found a large stone or some buried rubble. But when he dug a little more around it, he noticed the earth was becoming dark and damp in a strange way. A distinctive smell began to rise from the hole, unlike anything he had ever smelled. The dark liquid began to slowly seep from the bottom of the grave. Daniel stepped back, frightened, dropping the shovel and standing up to get a better look. He had never seen anything like it, but something in the back of his mind told him it was important. The smell grew stronger as the liquid increased in volume. For a few minutes he stood completely paralyzed, staring at that viscous substance that continued to slowly rise. His hands trembled, not only from the emotion of grief, but now also from the tension of not knowing what was happening. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process the surreal situation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Daniel looked around nervously, checking if anyone was watching. The vacant lot was usually frequented only by some homeless people like him, especially at night, but at that early morning hour it was completely deserted. The church next door was still closed and the nearby houses had their windows shut. He decided to quickly cover the hole with dirt, but leaving a discreet mark so he could find the spot again. His hands worked automatically while his mind tried to understand what he had discovered. He placed a few small stones in a specific formation to identify the exact spot later. He carefully picked up Thunder's body and looked for another nearby spot to perform the burial. He found a little nook under an old tree, where the soil was softer. There, he dug a smaller grave, but one sufficient to give the animal the rest it deserved. As he covered the dog's body with dirt, he whispered words of gratitude and farewell. The rest of the day passed as a confusing blur. Daniel tried to follow his normal routine of collecting materials, but he couldn't concentrate on anything. His mind kept returning to that dark liquid sprouting from the earth. Throughout the afternoon, he weighed the pros and cons of returning to the spot or simply forgetting what he had seen. At night, he sought shelter in the space beneath a staircase near the lot, from where he could discreetly watch the discovery site. Sleep did not come easily. Every noise in the street made him jolt awake, afraid that someone might have discovered his secret. Thunder's absence by his side made everything even harder. In the early hours, he woke to the sound of footsteps near the lot. Through a crack in the stairs, he could see a silhouette moving in the area where he had dug. His heart raced when he realized someone was tampering with the spot. He stayed still, trying not to make any noise that could betray his presence. The person stayed there for almost an hour, apparently investigating the entire area. Daniel couldn't see the face, but noticed it wasn't a typical homeless person. The clothes seemed better, and the movements were more organized, like someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. When dawn finally broke, Daniel waited for the person to move completely away before approaching the lot. His suspicions were confirmed. Someone had dug exactly at the spot where he found the liquid. The earth was disturbed, and there were marks from tools more suitable than his improvised shovel. Unfamiliar footprints around the area confirmed it wasn't his imagination during the night. Someone knew something and was interested in the same location. This made him even more nervous, but also confirmed his suspicions that he had discovered something truly valuable. Throughout that day, Daniel pretended to be collecting materials in the area, but in truth, he was watching to see if anyone would return. Around noon, he noticed a car parked on the nearby street, with 2 people inside observing the lot through binoculars. They stayed there for almost 2 hours before leaving. The tension was becoming unbearable. Daniel knew he needed help but had no idea who to turn to. As a young man without documents, without a fixed address, and without any social credibility, who would believe him if he told them about his discovery? And even if they believed him, how could he ensure they wouldn't try to steal everything from him? Around 3 in the afternoon, an elderly lady approached him. Mrs. Dorothy was known in the area for always offering food and water to the homeless. She was about 70, with graying hair always tied in a bun, and a genuine kindness in her eyes that put anyone at ease. "Daniel, my boy, I saw you around here yesterday morning. Were you burying something?" she asked in her soft but direct voice. "It was just Thunder, Mrs. Dorothy. He didn't make it after the accident," replied Daniel, his voice choked with genuine emotion. "I'm so sorry, dear. I know how close you were. But it seemed to me you dug in 2 different places. Did something else happen?" The lady's question was asked carefully, but Daniel realized she had observed more than he would have liked. Mrs. Dorothy was a retired former teacher who lived alone in a small house near the church. A widow for 15 years, she dedicated much of her time helping needy people in the neighborhood. She knew the story of almost every homeless person in the area and always tried to offer not just food, but also conversation and advice. Daniel hesitated before answering. The kindness in the lady's eyes tempted him to tell everything, but the fear of putting her in danger or losing his discovery made him stay silent. He decided to stick with the simplified version of the facts. "No, Mrs. Dorothy, it was just the burial. The first spot was too hard to dig, so I moved to under the tree," he said, avoiding her direct gaze. The lady observed him for a few seconds, clearly sensing there was something more to the story. But she respected the young man's silence and merely offered a sandwich and a bottle of water before going on her way. Daniel was grateful for her understanding, but also worried about how much she had noticed. The late afternoon brought a new unsettling surprise. A well-dressed man, about 40 years old, in a grey suit and carrying a leather briefcase, approached Daniel as he pretended to organize some recyclable materials near the lot. "Excuse me, young man. My name is Richard Thompson. I work in land business. I heard you know this area well." The man spoke politely, but there was something in his posture that made Daniel uncomfortable. "I just collect materials around here, sir. I don't know anything about land," replied Daniel, trying to keep his voice steady. "I understand, but sometimes people who work on the street notice things others don't. For example, if someone had dug around here recently or found something interesting, I could offer a good compensation for that information." Richard opened the briefcase and Daniel could see some money notes inside. Daniel's heart raced. How did that man know someone had dug at the site? Could he be one of the people who had been investigating during the early morning? The situation was getting dangerous very quickly. "I don't know anything, sir, sorry, but I have to keep working." Daniel began to walk away, but Richard followed him. "Hold on, kid. No need to be afraid. I'm willing to pay very well for any information. Let's say you $5,000 just to tell me if you've seen anyone digging around here in the last few days." The offer was tempting, but the man's tone was becoming more pressing. Daniel stopped walking and looked directly at Richard. $5,000 was more money than he had ever seen in his entire life. With that amount, he could buy decent clothes, pay for a few nights in a hotel, eat properly for months. But something about the situation wasn't right. "How did you know someone dug here?" asked Daniel, deciding to be direct. Richard smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile people use when they know more than they should. "Let's say I have my investigation methods. What's important is we can make a good deal for both of us. $10,000 if you show me exactly where the digging happened." He increased the offer, confirming he knew exactly what he was talking about. Daniel felt the danger approaching like a cold wave. That man clearly knew about his discovery, and the way he was conducting the conversation made it clear he wouldn't easily accept no for an answer. The young man looked around, checking if there were other people nearby. "I don't know what you're talking about, excuse me," said Daniel, turning his back and walking quickly in the opposite direction. "Think it over, kid. This might be your only chance to get something out of this. If you don't accept my offer, other people might not be so generous," Richard shouted after him, and those words sounded clearly like a threat. Daniel ran without looking back until he reached a busy street, where he blended in among other people. His heart was beating so hard it felt like it would leap out of his chest. The situation had just become much more complicated and dangerous than he had imagined. He spent the rest of the night hiding in different places, always moving every few hours. Paranoia had taken over his mind. Every person who passed nearby seemed suspicious. Every car that slowed down sent him into a panic. The discovery that should have been a blessing was turning into a nightmare. The next day, he decided to seek help at the neighborhood police station. Even knowing his appearance didn't inspire trust, Daniel thought the police would be the safest place to report his suspicions about people investigating the property during the early morning hours. The officer on duty, a robust man in his 50s, received him with visible disdain. Daniel tried to explain that he was being threatened by people interested in the vacant lot, but his story sounded confusing and unlikely to the policeman's ears. "Listen here, kid. Don't come making up stories to get attention. If you're having problems with other homeless people, sort it out far away from my station. And if I find out you're up to something on the church's property, it'll be worse for you," said the officer, clearly not taking Daniel seriously. The humiliation was complete when the policeman even suggested he look for a shelter or some social program, as if he were just another troubled youth trying to get attention. Daniel left the police station feeling even more alone and unprotected than before. He spent the next 2 days completely avoiding the area of the property, but the curiosity and the need to understand what he had discovered kept eating away at him inside. During his walks around the neighborhood, he began paying attention to random conversations, trying to catch any information about the property or about strange activities in the area. That's how he found out by talking to a public sanitation worker that the property officially belonged to a family that had emigrated abroad many years ago. The information left him even more confused and worried. If the property had an owner, anything he had found legally did not belong to him. Despair began to take hold when Daniel realized he was in an impossible situation. He had discovered something valuable, but he couldn't legally exploit it. He couldn't sell it without proving ownership. And he was still being pursued by people who wanted to take everything from him by force. The feeling of powerlessness was suffocating. During 3 years living on the streets, Daniel had learned to survive with almost nothing. But he had always kept a secret hope that one day his luck would change. Now that he had finally found something that could transform his life, he discovered he might have no right to the discovery at all. He decided to seek help at the church near the property. Father William, a kind man in his 60s, often helped homeless people with advice and sometimes with sporadic work. Daniel thought perhaps the clergyman could guide him on legal matters, or at least offer some wise counsel. "Father, do you know anything about that vacant lot behind the church? Who are the owners?" asked Daniel, after waiting for a morning mass to end. "Ah, that area belongs to the Miller family. They emigrated to Canada about 20 years ago, right after old Mr. Miller passed away. The land has been abandoned ever since," explained the priest. "Why do you ask, my son?" Daniel hesitated, but decided to tell a partial version of the truth. He explained that he was being pursued by people interested in the property, without specifically mentioning what he had discovered. The priest listened attentively, showing genuine concern. "That is strange indeed, Daniel. It's been years since anyone showed interest in that land. Is there some strange activity happening that I should know about?" asked Father William. "I'm not sure, Father. I just know there are people investigating the property at night, and a man offered me money for information about excavations on the site." Daniel decided to be a bit more specific, hoping the clergyman could help him in some way. The priest thought for a few minutes before answering. His experience dealing with the community's social problems had taught him to recognize when seemingly simple situations were actually more complex. "I'll make some calls to try and find out if anyone has contacted the Miller family recently. And you be careful, my son. If strangers are interested in that land, there might be something more behind it," advised the priest. The conversation with Father William brought Daniel some relief, but also confirmed his suspicions that the situation was more serious than he had imagined. If even the priest was worried, it meant the activities on the property really weren't normal. On his way back through the neighborhood streets, Daniel noticed he was being followed. A dark blue car always kept the same distance from him, no matter where he went. When he stopped, the car stopped. When he changed direction, the vehicle discreetly followed him. Fear turned to panic when Daniel realized there were two people in the car, and one of them seemed to be photographing or filming his movements. He began to run without a specific direction, entering alleys and narrow streets where a car couldn't easily follow him. He managed to hide in a small recycling materials depot where he knew the owner, an elderly man who always treated him with respect. He stayed there for several hours, trying to think of a solution to this situation that was spiraling completely out of his control. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. That afternoon, while he remained hidden, Daniel overheard a conversation between two men on the street that alarmed him even more. They were talking about taking care of the kid problem and ensuring full access to the site. There was no doubt they were referring to him and the property. Night fell with Daniel still unsure of what decision to make. Every option seemed to carry huge risks. If he tried to negotiate with the men pursuing him, he could be tricked or even suffer some kind of violence. If he kept running, they might simply take the property by force and he would lose any chance of benefiting from his discovery. It was then that an unexpected idea came to his mind. What if he went directly to the Miller family? If he could get in touch with the true owners of the property, he could tell the truth about his discovery, and perhaps they could reach a fair agreement. At least that way, he would be dealing with the right people. The next day, Daniel sought out Father William again to ask for help in locating the Miller family. The clergyman had made some calls and discovered he still had sporadic contact with one of the family's granddaughters, a woman named Patricia, who had recently returned to the United States. Patricia Miller returned from Canada a few months ago. She's a retired teacher and is living in a small town, organizing the family inheritance paperwork. "I have her phone number if you'd like to talk," offered the priest. Daniel immediately accepted the offer. This could be his only chance to resolve the situation honestly and legally. The priest made the call and briefly explained that a young man needed to speak with her about her family's property in New York City. Patricia was willing to talk and scheduled a meeting for the next day at the church itself. She said she would travel by bus overnight to arrive in the morning. Daniel spent the whole night mentally rehearsing how he would tell his story, trying to find the right words to explain his discovery without sounding like a madman or a con artist. The morning of the meeting arrived, heavy with tension and expectation. Daniel had managed to take a shower at a nearby gas station and put on his least dirty clothes, trying to make the best impression possible. He arrived at the church an hour before the scheduled time, more nervous than he had ever been in his life. Patricia Miller arrived promptly at 9 in the morning. She was a woman of about 60, with graying hair tied in a simple ponytail, wearing modest but well-kept clothes. There was something in her posture that conveyed dignity and kindness, reminding Daniel of teachers he had known in school before his life fell apart. "You must be Daniel," she said, approaching with a cautious smile. "Father William told me you have something important to discuss about my family's land." "Yes, Mrs. Dorothy, It's kind of complicated to explain, Daniel stammered, suddenly overcome with shame about his appearance and living situation. Patricia observed him for a few seconds, noting his nervousness and discomfort. As an experienced teacher, she had developed over the years a natural ability to make people feel more at ease in difficult situations. "How about we sit over there on the park bench? That way we can talk more calmly," she suggested, pointing to a more secluded spot near the church. As they walked to the bench, Daniel noticed that Patricia paid attention to everything around her, as if she were recognizing places from her childhood. She commented on how the neighborhood had changed since the last time she had been there, creating a more relaxed atmosphere for the conversation that would follow. "My family lived here for over 50 years, Patricia began. "My grandfather bought that land in the 1950s, when it was still a rural area. Later, he built the house where I was born and raised. When he passed away, my parents decided to emigrate, and I went with them because I was very young." Daniel listened attentively, realizing that Patricia had developed a strong emotional bond with that place. This could be positive for his chances of reaching an agreement, but it also meant she might feel offended if she knew someone had been tampering with the family land. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need to tell you something that happened a few days ago on your family's land. Please, let me explain everything before you judge," Daniel asked, deciding to be completely honest. Patricia made a gesture of assent, indicating she was ready to listen. Daniel took a deep breath and began to tell the whole story, from losing Thunder to his discovery of the dark liquid in the soil. He talked about the people who had been pursuing him and about the fear he was feeling. Throughout the account, Patricia remained silent, just watching the young man's expressions attentively. As a seasoned educator, she knew how to identify when someone was lying or making up stories, and there was something in Daniel's desperate sincerity that convinced her he was telling the truth. "Are you sure it was oil?" she asked when Daniel finished his account. "I'm not sure of anything, ma'am. I've never seen oil in my life. I only know it was a dark, oily liquid with a strong, characteristic smell. And I know that other people became very interested when they found out," Daniel answered honestly. Patricia was silent for a few minutes, processing all the information she had received. The situation was surreal, but the boy's honesty and the consistent details of the story convinced her that something truly extraordinary had happened. "Daniel, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer with total honesty. If there really is oil on my family's land, why are you telling me this? You could have simply sold the information to those people who approached you," said Patricia, testing the young man's character. The question caught Daniel by surprise, but he didn't hesitate in his response. "Because it wouldn't be right, ma'am. The land isn't mine. The discovery happened by chance, and I don't want to make money by taking advantage of other people. Besides, those people who approached me don't seem trustworthy," Daniel explained sincerely. The answer impressed Patricia deeply. During her years as a teacher, she had met thousands of people and learned to value genuine honesty when she found it. There was something special about that young man who, even in a desperate situation, maintained solid moral principles. "All right, Daniel. I'll trust you. How about we go back to the land together so you can show me exactly where you made this discovery?" proposed Patricia. Daniel's heart raced. This was the moment of truth. If Patricia verified his story and confirmed the discovery, perhaps they could find a fair solution for both. If she discovered he was lying or exaggerating, he would lose any chance of help. They walked together to the vacant lot, and Daniel showed exactly where he had dug in an attempt to bury Thunder. Patricia observed the marks in the earth carefully, confirming that several people had disturbed the spot recently. The surrounding area was clearly disturbed by digging. "Are you sure it was here?" asked Patricia. "Yes, ma'am. And look at the little stones I left marking the place." Daniel pointed to the specific formation of stones he had arranged days before. Patricia crouched down and examined the earth more closely. There was a subtle but noticeable smell, different from the normal odor of soil. When she stirred the earth with a stick, she could see dark traces mixed with the normal dirt. "There really is something different here," she murmured, more to herself than to Daniel. At that moment, they were interrupted by a voice behind them. "How nice that you came to make our job easier," said Richard Thompson, approaching accompanied by two large, intimidating men. Daniel felt his blood run cold. How had those men discovered he would be there? Had they been under surveillance since the meeting at the church? The situation had become dangerous very quickly. Patricia, however, showed no fear. As an experienced woman who had faced many difficult situations in life, she remained calm and looked directly at Richard. "Who are you and what are you doing on my family's land?" she asked with authority. "Ma'am, my name is Richard Thompson, and I represent a mineral exploration company. We are interested in acquiring the exploration rights to this property. We can make a very generous offer." Richard completely changed his aggressive tone when he realized he was speaking to the true owner. "I have no interest in selling anything, and you have no right to be investigating my property without permission," Patricia replied firmly. The tension in the air was palpable. Daniel sensed the situation could turn violent at any moment, especially because Richard had brought two men who clearly weren't there just to talk. He positioned himself discreetly closer to Patricia, ready to protect her if necessary. "Ma'am, perhaps you don't fully understand the value of what you have here. We're talking about a discovery that could be worth millions of dollars. An elderly woman like yourself doesn't have the resources to properly exploit this," said Richard, his tone beginning to become more pressuring. "Young man, I am old enough to know when someone is trying to intimidate me, and enough experience to know that honest people don't act this way," replied Patricia, not letting herself be intimidated. Daniel admired the woman's courage, but at the same time grew worried about how Richard was reacting to her resistance. The two men accompanying him began to position themselves more threateningly, blocking possible escape routes. "Look, you two don't know who you're dealing with. This discovery will be exploited, with or without your cooperation. It would be much better for everyone if we reached a friendly agreement," said Richard, making the implicit threat very clear. It was at that moment that Patricia made a decision that surprised everyone, including Daniel. "All right, Mr. Richard, I will accept your proposal," she said calmly. Daniel looked at her, alarmed. Had she let herself be intimidated by the threats? All the admiration he had been feeling for her courage began to give way to disappointment. Richard smiled, satisfied, thinking he had easily gotten what he wanted. "Excellent decision, ma'am. I'll fetch the papers from the car so we can formalize the agreement right away," said Richard, signaling for the two men to follow him. As soon as they moved away, Patricia turned to Daniel with a mischievous smile that left him completely confused. "Daniel, do you trust me?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am, but you're not going to sell to them, are you?" Daniel whispered back. "Of course not, my boy, but we need time to think of a better strategy, and for that, sometimes it's necessary to play their game temporarily," Patricia explained quickly. Daniel began to understand that Patricia was much smarter and more experienced than he had initially imagined. She wasn't surrendering, she was buying time and analyzing the situation to make a smarter decision. Richard returned with a folder full of documents and a golden pen. His expression was that of someone who already considered the deal closed. The two men positioned themselves nearby, clearly to ensure no one would change their mind at the last moment. "Here are the mineral rights assignment contracts. The initial amount is $50,000, but there will obviously be a share in future profits," said Richard, extending the papers to Patricia. Patricia took the documents and began to read attentively, demonstrating far more legal knowledge than Richard expected. She asked specific questions about clauses and technical terms, making it clear she wouldn't be easily fooled. "This contract is very vague regarding the profit-sharing percentages and the exploitation timelines. Furthermore, I see no guarantee of environmental protection," Patricia observed. "Ma'am, those details can be adjusted later. What's important now is to secure the basic exploitation rights," said Richard, beginning to grow impatient. "No, Mr. Richard, if we are going to do business, it needs to be complete and clear from the start. I will take these documents for my lawyer to review. I'll give you a definitive answer in 3 days," said Patricia, folding the papers and placing them in her bag. Richard was clearly displeased with the delay, but he couldn't force the situation without risking future legal complications. After a few minutes of fruitless discussion, he and his companions left, but not without making it clear they expected a positive answer. "Patricia, you were incredible. How did you manage to stay so calm like that?" said Daniel as soon as they were alone. My boy, when you've lived as long as I have, you learn that people like that are more bark than tree. They need us more than we need them, otherwise they wouldn't be pushing so hard, Patricia explained with a smile. Daniel was impressed by the woman's wisdom and courage. Throughout his life on the streets, he had learned to avoid confrontations, but Patricia had faced the situation head-on and emerged victorious, at least temporarily. "And now, what are we going to do?" asked Daniel. "Now we're going to properly figure out what you found here. I know some people who can help us do a proper analysis without drawing attention. After that, we'll decide the best way to proceed," replied Patricia. Over the next 3 days, Patricia put into action a carefully crafted plan. She knew a retired geologist who had been a university professor and managed to convince him to discreetly analyze soil samples. Daniel followed the entire process, learning a lot about mining, property rights, and negotiation strategies. Patricia treated him as an equal partner, consulting him on all important decisions and explaining each step of the process. The analysis results confirmed both of their suspicions. There were clear signs of petroleum deposits beneath the land. But the most surprising discovery was that there were also signs of other valuable minerals, including a significant amount of mineral water with therapeutic properties. "Daniel, it seems your discovery is even bigger than we imagined," said Patricia when they received the analysis results. "What does this mean for us?" asked Daniel, still trying to process the magnitude of the situation. "It means we have several options ahead. We can sell the rights to a large company, we can try to develop it ourselves, or we can think of a third alternative that benefits not just us, but the whole community," explained Patricia. The idea of a third alternative intrigued Daniel. During his years on the streets, he had often dreamed of having the means to help other people in situations similar to his. Perhaps this was an opportunity to change his life and the lives of others at the same time. "What kind of alternative are you thinking of?" asked Daniel curiously. "It's still a bit fuzzy in my mind, but what if instead of simply selling or commercially exploiting it, we created something that brought long-term benefits to the entire region?" proposed Patricia. Before they could delve deeper into the conversation about this third alternative, Richard Thompson reappeared, this time accompanied by a larger number of people and with an even more aggressive stance than before. "Playtime is over. You will sign these contracts today or we will resolve this situation another way," said Richard, clearly losing patience with the delay. Patricia looked around and realized that this time they had surrounded the property on all sides. The situation was becoming truly dangerous, and she began to wonder if she hadn't underestimated that group's determination and resources. "Mr. Richard, threats won't make me change my mind. If you have legal rights to this land, seek justice, otherwise leave my property immediately," said Patricia, maintaining her firm stance despite the fear she was beginning to feel. "Ma'am, justice takes too long and we don't have time to waste. This discovery can't sit idle while you stall with lawyers and bureaucracy," replied Richard. Daniel realized the situation was about to spiral out of control. Richard and his men clearly no longer intended to resolve things peacefully. He looked around for possible escape routes, but they were truly surrounded. It was then that something unexpected happened. Father William appeared on the property accompanied by several members of the local community, including Mrs. Dorothy, the elderly woman who always helped Daniel. "What is going on here?" asked the priest with authority. Richard looked visibly uncomfortable with the arrival of the other people. His intimidation strategy worked best when the victims were isolated and without witnesses. "Father, this is a private matter between us and the property owner. There's no need to involve other people," said Richard, trying to remain calm. "Any matter involving threats in our community is indeed our business," replied Father William, "and from what I can see, you're not here for a peaceful conversation." The presence of the community completely changed the dynamic of the situation. Richard and his men realized they couldn't use intimidation with so many witnesses present. After a few minutes of tense discussion, they withdrew, but not before making it clear they would return. "Patricia, Daniel, are you okay?" asked Father William as soon as the men had moved away. "We are, Father. Thank you for showing up at the right time," replied Patricia, clearly relieved. "Mrs. Dorothy came to me worried because she saw strange activity on the property. We thought it best to come check," explained the priest. Daniel was moved to realize he wasn't alone in the situation. The community he had always considered distant was mobilizing to protect him and Patricia. It was the first time in years he felt he was part of something bigger than himself. "Daniel, my son, now tell me properly what's happening here," asked Mrs. Dorothy in her maternal voice. This time, Daniel told the whole story, without omitting a single detail. He spoke about the discovery, about the people pursuing him, about the geological analysis results, about everything. Complete honesty seemed the most appropriate path given the support he was receiving. The community's reaction was mixed. Some people were excited about the possibility of prosperity for the region. Others expressed concern about potential negative changes the exploitation could bring. But everyone agreed that decisions should be made by the community itself, not by outside companies using intimidation. "What if we organized ourselves to explore this discovery collectively?" suggested Mrs. Dorothy. "That way the benefits would stay here in the region, with the people who actually live here." The idea was ambitious, but it was well received by those present. Father William recalled that the parish had experience organizing community projects and that they could adapt that experience to coordinate a larger initiative. Patricia was visibly interested in the community proposal. As a former teacher, she had always believed in the power of collective organization to solve complex problems, and as the heir to the property, she had the legal authority needed to make this type of project viable. "It's an interesting idea, but we would need a lot of planning and organization. Mineral exploitation isn't something simple to do," Patricia considered. "But it's also not impossible," said Father William. "I know other communities that organized for similar projects. The important thing is to have proper technical advice and a lot of transparency in the process." Daniel listened to the discussion with growing enthusiasm. The possibility of turning his discovery into something that would benefit the entire community was much more attractive than simply making personal money, especially because he knew many people there faced difficulties similar to those he had always faced. In the days that followed, the community project idea took shape and gained support. Patricia, Daniel, and Father William became the informal coordinators of the initiative, organizing meetings, researching legal alternatives, and seeking technical advice. The first major decision was to hire a law firm specializing in community projects to guide the entire legal process. Patricia used her retirement savings to pay the initial costs, while Daniel contributed his detailed knowledge of the discovery and the local situation. During this period, Richard Thompson and his company made several attempts to interfere with the project. They offered increasingly larger sums, tried to legally challenge the ownership of the land, and even attempted to bribe some people in the community. But the group's unity remained firm against all pressures. The second major decision was to define exactly how the extraction would be carried out. Technical studies indicated it would be possible to extract both oil and mineral water sustainably without causing significant damage to the local environment. Daniel was surprised to discover he had a natural aptitude for understanding the technical aspects of mineral extraction. Perhaps his experience collecting recyclable materials had developed in him an instinct for identifying and classifying different types of materials. Patricia, in turn, demonstrated exceptional skills for coordinating people and resolving conflicts. Her experience as a teacher proved invaluable for mediating discussions among community members with differing opinions about the project. Father William contributed with his credibility in the community and his experience organizing social projects. His presence gave moral legitimacy to the enterprise and reassured people who might have been suspicious of the organizers' motivations. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. The first major obstacle arose when they discovered an initial investment of nearly $500,000 would be needed to begin proper extraction. No community member had resources for that kind of investment, and traditional bank loans were practically impossible for such an innovative project. It was Mrs. Dorothy who suggested the solution that would change everything. She remembered that her daughter worked for an international foundation that funded sustainable community development projects. Perhaps they could present their initiative as a pilot model for that type of program. Preparing the proposal for the foundation took 2 months of intensive work. Patricia, Daniel, and Father William dedicated practically all their free time researching, writing, revising, and refining every aspect of the project. Daniel discovered he had a talent for visual presentations, creating maps and diagrams that clearly explained both the discovery and the extraction plans. His experience living in the region had given him a detailed knowledge of the geography and local needs, which proved very valuable. Patricia took responsibility for the pedagogical part of the project, developing training programs so community members could assume technical roles in the extraction. Her experience as an educator was fundamental in creating an accessible and effective learning structure. Father William coordinated the social and ethical aspects of the project, ensuring all decisions were made democratically and transparently. He also took responsibility for maintaining constant dialogue with local authorities to ensure everything was done legally. The Foundation's response came after 3 months of analysis. They not only approved the initial funding, but also decided to use the project as a case study for future similar initiatives in other countries. The investment would be $800,000, 50% more than they had requested. The news of the funding approval caused euphoria in the community, but also attracted unwanted attention. Richard Thompson and his company intensified their attempts to halt the project, this time using more sophisticated legal tactics. They challenged in court Patricia's capacity to make decisions about the land, arguing that as an heir who had lived abroad for decades, she did not have sufficient ties to the property. They also tried to argue that community-led extraction would be technically inadequate and environmentally dangerous. The legal battle lasted nearly 6 months and consumed a significant portion of the funding in attorney fees. But the community remained united throughout the process, even organizing peaceful demonstrations in support of the project. Daniel proved to be a natural orator during these demonstrations, managing to explain in a simple and moving way how the project would change not only his life, but the lives of dozens of families in the region. His personal story of overcoming adversity became a powerful symbol for the entire initiative. The final legal victory came when the judge overseeing the case personally visited the community and could see the genuine support the project had garnered. He rejected all challenges from Richard Thompson's company and authorized the start of operations. With the legal issues resolved, the moment finally arrived to begin the actual extraction. The first well was dug exactly on the spot where Daniel had discovered the oil, in a ceremony attended by the entire community. Daniel was invited to take the first symbolic shovel, recognizing his fundamental role in the entire discovery. The moment was emotional for him as he remembered Thunder and how the sadness of loss had transformed into hope for renewal for an entire community. The initial results of the extraction exceeded all expectations. The quantity of oil was greater than the initial analyses had indicated, and the quality of the mineral water proved exceptionally high, with therapeutic properties that caught the interest of university researchers. More important than the quantity, however, was the way the community organized itself to manage the extraction. Specific committees were created for each aspect of the project: technical, financial, environmental, social, and educational. Each committee had representatives democratically elected by the residents. Daniel was chosen to coordinate the technical committee, a responsibility he took very seriously. During the preceding months, he had studied mineral extraction intensively and had become surprisingly competent in the area. His personal motivation and natural intelligence compensated for his lack of formal education. Patricia took charge of the educational committee, developing training programs that allowed people with no prior experience to learn the skills necessary to work in the extraction. Her natural teaching ability and patience made her the perfect instructor for this type of training. The initial success of the project attracted positive attention from national media. Reports on the initiative were published in newspapers and broadcast on television programs, presenting the community as an example of how to develop natural resources ethically and sustainably. This visibility brought new opportunities, but also new challenges. Local politicians who had initially ignored the project began wanting to associate themselves with it to gain votes. Business people from other regions offered partnerships that could be profitable but would compromise the community's independence. The most difficult decision came when a major oil company, offered to buy the entire project for an amount equivalent to 5 years of estimated profits. The offer was tempting because it would eliminate all the risks and uncertainties of independent extraction. The debate within the community lasted for weeks. Some families were experiencing financial difficulties and saw the sale as an immediate solution to their problems. Others believed that in the long run, it would be more advantageous to maintain community control over the project. Daniel found himself in a difficult position during these debates. As someone who had lived in extreme poverty for years, he understood the urgency of the family's financial needs. At the same time, he had developed a long-term vision and believed in the transformative potential of the community project. Patricia was also divided. As a retiree with limited resources, she would benefit significantly from an immediate sale. But as an educator, she believed in the pedagogical and social value of keeping the project as a community initiative. Father William maintained a mediating position throughout the debate, helping the community discuss all options without pressuring anyone in a specific direction. His pastoral experience had taught him that important decisions need to be made by each person according to their conscience. The final vote took place in an assembly that lasted an entire afternoon. Each family had the right to one vote, and the decision would be made by a simple majority. The tension was palpable as each vote was counted publicly. The result was close. 51% of the votes were for maintaining the community project, 49% for an immediate sale. The community had decided to continue on the more difficult, but potentially more rewarding path. The families who had voted for the sale were initially disappointed, but agreed to respect the majority's decision. To minimize conflict, an emergency fund was created that could help families in critical financial situations while the project developed. With the sale question resolved, the focus returned to improving the extraction operations. The initial equipment was basic but functional. As profits accumulated, it became possible to invest in more advanced and efficient technology. Daniel took on the responsibility of researching and selecting new equipment. His natural ease in understanding technical aspects, combined with training courses he took at nearby universities, made him surprisingly competent in this area. Patricia developed partnerships with technical schools in the region to create an internship program that allowed local youth to learn about mineral extraction while contributing to the project. Many of these young people ended up being hired permanently as the project grew. The first year of operations resulted in profits exceeding the most optimistic estimates. Each participating family received a share equivalent to 4 minimum wages, in addition to the direct and indirect jobs created by the project. More important than the financial benefits, however, were the social transformations the project provided. The community developed a sense of cohesion and pride that hadn't existed before. People who previously barely knew each other now worked together for common goals. Daniel experienced the most dramatic personal transformation. From a young man with no prospects living on the streets, he became a respected leader in the community. His technical knowledge and communication skills made him a reference for others interested in similar projects. Patricia discovered a new calling in community development. Even though she was of an age to enjoy a quiet retirement, she decided to dedicate her energy to helping other communities develop similar projects. Her combination of pedagogical knowledge and practical experience proved very valuable. The second year brought new challenges and opportunities. The mineral water extraction proved even more profitable than the oil, due to the unique therapeutic properties of the water found on the land. Researchers at the State University began studying these properties and discovered that the water contained a rare combination of minerals that could be beneficial for treating certain health conditions. This opened possibilities for partnerships with research institutes and hospitals. The discovery of the water's medicinal properties created a new dimension for the project. Beyond the economic aspects, there was now also a public health component that could benefit people far beyond the local community. Daniel became especially interested in this medicinal aspect, remembering how his mother had suffered from health problems that might have been treated with that special water. He volunteered to coordinate the medical research, working directly with the university scientists. Patricia saw in the medicinal discovery an opportunity to expand the project's educational impact. She proposed creating a study center on the therapeutic use of mineral waters, which could attract researchers from across the country and establish the community as a reference in the field. The news of the water's medicinal properties attracted international attention. A European pharmaceutical company offered a partnership to develop products based on the mineral water, with potential for worldwide distribution. This time, the international partnership proposal was received with more caution by the community. Past experiences with outside companies had taught them the importance of maintaining control over the project's fundamental decisions. The negotiations lasted months and involved lawyers specialized in international contracts. The final agreement ensured that the community would retain ownership of the water source and control over the volumes extracted, while the European company would be responsible for the research, development, and distribution of the products. The third year marked the consolidation of the project as an internationally recognized model of sustainable development. Delegations from other countries visited the community to study how to replicate the experience in their own regions. Daniel was invited to speak at international conferences on community development. His personal transformation story, combined with his technical knowledge of the project, made him a highly sought-after speaker. Patricia published a book on educational methodologies for community development projects based on her experience in the project. The book became an academic reference and further increased the initiative's international recognition. Father William was recognized by the Archdiocese for his social development work. He used this visibility to promote similar projects in other parishes, helping to disseminate the model developed by the community. At this point in the story, Richard Thompson reappeared unexpectedly. His company had faced financial difficulties due to several unsuccessful investments, and he approached the community proposing a partnership instead of competition. Richard's proposal was to work as a consultant to help other communities develop similar projects, using the expertise his company had developed in mineral exploration, but within the community model created by Daniel, Patricia, and Father William. The decision on whether to accept Richard as a partner generated intense debates in the community. Many people still remembered the intimidation and threats he had made in the project's early days. Daniel, surprisingly, was one of the advocates for giving Richard a second chance. His own experience of personal transformation had taught him that people can change when faced with different circumstances. Patricia maintained a cautious position, suggesting that any partnership with Richard should include rigorous safeguards and a trial period to verify if his intentions were genuinely constructive. Father William reminded the community about principles of forgiveness and second chances, but also emphasized the importance of protecting the project against possible internal sabotage attempts. The final decision was to accept Richard as a temporary consultant, but with clear limitations on his access to confidential information and his participation in strategic decisions. He would have to prove his trustworthiness through concrete actions over the course of a year. Richard accepted the conditions and began working with genuine dedication for the project's success. His experience in mineral exploration proved valuable, especially for optimizing processes and reducing operational costs. More importantly, Richard brought contacts and knowledge about markets that allowed the community to expand the commercialization of their products to new regions. Profits increased significantly with these expansions. In the fourth year of the project, the community was already prosperous enough to begin investing in infrastructure improvements for the entire region. A new school, a health clinic, and a community library were built. Daniel coordinated the construction of the school, ensuring it had proper laboratories for geology and mining studies. His goal was for young people in the region to be able to learn the necessary skills locally to work on similar projects. Patricia was invited to lead the new school, a position she accepted with enthusiasm. At 65, she found a new way to use her educational experience to benefit future generations of the community. The health clinic included a research center on the therapeutic uses of the local mineral water. Doctors and researchers from various universities established partnerships to study the medicinal benefits of the water. The library became a documentation center on sustainable community development. Researchers from around the world sent studies and reports that were organized and made available to other interested communities. The fifth year brought official recognition of the project by the United Nations, which included it in its list of best practices for sustainable development. This recognition opened doors to even greater international funding. Daniel was invited to join a UN advisory board on community projects. At 27, he became one of the youngest people to hold such a position, representing the perspective of communities that had managed to develop autonomously. Patricia received an honorary doctorate from an international university for her contribution to the development of community educational methodologies. The academic recognition solidified her reputation as an expert in the field. Father William was promoted to Regional Coordinator of Church Social Projects, a position that allowed him to replicate the model developed by the community in dozens of other parishes. Richard, who had completed his probationary period with exemplary dedication, was accepted as a permanent partner in the project. His personal transformation was as significant as Daniel's, proving that the right circumstances can bring out the best in people. Mrs. Dorothy, who had turned 75, was honored as the godmother of the project. Her intuition that something special was happening and her decision to mobilize the community in the early days had been fundamental to the success of the entire initiative. In the sixth year, the community decided to create its own foundation to support the development of similar projects in other regions. The foundation would be funded with part of the profits from the local project and managed by the community members themselves. The first initiative supported by the foundation was developed in a rural community in Appalachia that had discovered deposits of special clay suitable for artistic ceramics. Daniel traveled personally to help with the planning and implementation of the project. Patricia developed a distance learning course on community development methodologies, which began to be offered free of charge online to leaders across the country. The course combined her pedagogical experience with the practical knowledge gained from the project. Father William coordinated the creation of a national network of parishes involved in community development projects. The network facilitated the exchange of experiences and the coordination of efforts among different initiatives. Richard established a consulting firm specialized in supporting communities in developing sustainable natural resource exploitation projects. His conversion from a predatory exploiter to a community facilitator became a case study in business schools. The seventh year marked a new phase of the project with the start of exploitation of a second area of the land where additional deposits of valuable minerals were discovered. This time, all exploitation was done with cutting-edge technology and maximum environmental care. Daniel led the technical team responsible for the new exploration, applying everything he had learned during the previous years. His technical competence now rivaled that of engineers graduated from prestigious universities. Patricia coordinated an exchange program that brought university students from several countries to intern on the project. The young people contributed up-to-date academic knowledge while learning about the practical application of sustainable development. The new exploration revealed deposits of lithium, a strategic mineral for manufacturing batteries for electric cars. This discovery multiplied the economic value of the project again and attracted attention from green technology companies. The negotiations for lithium exploitation were even more careful than the previous ones. The community had learned to properly value its resources and to negotiate contracts that guaranteed long-term benefits rather than immediate profits. The final agreement for lithium exploitation included technology transfer clauses that would allow the community to develop its own mineral processing capabilities. This would add much more value to the final product and significantly increase profits. In the eighth year, the community was already recognized worldwide as a model of sustainable development. Government delegations from dozens of countries visited the project to study how to implement similar policies on a national scale. Daniel was invited to join advisory committees of international development banks, helping to evaluate funding proposals for community projects in developing countries. Patricia established a partnership with an international university to create a master's program in sustainable community development. The program would be offered in 3 countries simultaneously using distance learning technologies. Father William was appointed special consultant to the Vatican on social development issues, a position that allowed him to influence Catholic Church policies worldwide. Richard expanded his consulting firm to serve international clients, always maintaining the principles of community development he had learned in the project. His personal transformation became a case study in business ethics programs. Mrs. Dorothy, even at 80 years old, remained active in the project, now as a senior advisor. Her wisdom and experience were constantly consulted for important decisions, and her presence symbolized the continuity and fundamental values of the initiative. The 9th year brought the greatest challenge the project had faced, a global economic crisis that affected mineral commodity prices and significantly reduced demand for the community's products. Instead of panicking, the community used the crisis as an opportunity to diversify its economic activities. Daniel led the development of a high-tech product line based on local minerals. Patricia coordinated the creation of a research and development center that attracted scientists and engineers interested in working on innovative projects in a community setting. The diversification also included the development of sustainable tourism, leveraging international interest in the project to attract visitors eager to learn about community development. The visitor center, built to accommodate tourists, became a significant source of additional income, especially during periods of low mineral prices. Local guides trained by Patricia told the story of the project and explained the techniques used. The global crisis also accelerated the development of partnerships with universities and research institutes. These academic partners provided advanced technical knowledge in exchange for access to real-world data from a successful community project. In the project's 10th year, the community celebrated a decade of transformation with a large festival that brought together visitors from around the world. Daniel was the keynote speaker at the ceremony, recounting the full story from its accidental discovery to international success. During his speech, Daniel made a special mention of Thunder, the dog whose loss had led to the discovery that changed everything. A monument honoring the animal was unveiled at the exact spot where it all began. Patricia announced during the celebration her decision to donate all of her family's land to the community, ensuring the project could continue indefinitely under local control. The donation was formalized with a deed that prevented any future sale of the property. Father William conducted a special blessing ceremony for the entire project, giving thanks not only for the material success, but especially for the human transformation that had occurred. Dozens of families had escaped poverty and found dignity and purpose. Richard gave an emotional speech asking for forgiveness for the threats and intimidation in the project's early days. He acknowledged that his personal transformation had only been possible thanks to the community's generosity in giving him a second chance. Mrs. Dorothy, as the eldest person present, was invited to cut the ribbon for a new phase of the project, an international institute for community development that would be permanently established in the region. The institute would be directed by Daniel, who had earned a doctorate in sustainable development, through a special program that recognized his practical experience as equivalent to traditional academic training. Patricia would be the academic director of the institute, responsible for developing curricula and teaching methodologies that could be applied in different cultural and economic contexts. Father William would coordinate the ethical and social aspects of the institute, ensuring all activities were carried out in accordance with principles of social justice and environmental sustainability. During the 10th year celebration, the cumulative results of the project were announced. Over 1,000 direct and indirect jobs created, tens of millions of dollars in profits distributed to participating families, and documented positive impacts on the health, education, and quality of life of the entire region. More important than the numbers, however, were the personal testimonies of transformation. Young people who had grown up in the project spoke about how the experience had shaped their life perspectives and professional ambitions. Families who had participated from the beginning described how the project not only improved their material conditions, but also strengthened community bonds and created a sense of collective purpose that hadn't existed before. International visitors present at the celebration announced commitments to support replicating the model in their own countries, ensuring the project's impact would spread far beyond the original community's borders. Universities from 5 continents signed cooperation agreements with the institute that would be created, establishing a global research network on sustainable community development. The United States government announced during the celebration the creation of a national program inspired by the Community Project, with initial funding of $100 million to support similar initiatives in other regions of the country. Multinational corporations present at the celebration pledged to modify their natural resource exploitation practices, adopting principles of community participation inspired by the model developed by Daniel, Patricia, and their companions. The celebration concluded with the launch of a book telling the complete story of the project, from the earliest days to its international impacts. The book was simultaneously translated into 12 languages and distributed for free via the internet. In the epilogue of the celebration, Daniel returned alone to the spot where he had buried Thunder 10 years earlier. There he reflected on how a painful loss had transformed into a blessing for hundreds of people. The tree planted at the burial site had grown and become lush, offering shade and beauty to the entire area. Daniel sat beneath it and made a silent promise to continue honoring Thunder's memory through his work for the well-being of others. Patricia joined him a few minutes later, bringing a wreath of flowers to place at Thunder's monument. At 70 years old, she still maintained the energy and enthusiasm that had been fundamental to the project's success. "Do you think Thunder would be proud of what we built?" asked Daniel. "I'm sure he would, my son. He was always a protector, and now he's protecting an entire community through what you two discovered," replied Patricia with a smile. Father William arrived carrying a small bronze plaque to be installed on the monument. The plaque bore a simple inscription: "In memory of Thunder, whose unconditional love planted the seeds of a more just community." Richard appeared last, bringing saplings of fruit trees to plant around the monument. His proposal was to create a small orchard, symbolizing how sorrow can transform into abundance when channeled properly. Mrs. Dorothy, despite her mobility limitations at 80 years old, insisted on participating in the tree planting. For her, that act represented the continuity between generations and the hope that the project would continue thriving for many decades. As they planted the saplings, they talked about plans for the next 10 years. Daniel had developed ideas to expand the model to urban areas, working with communities facing different but equally complex challenges. Patricia wanted to develop a special program to empower elderly women as leaders of community development projects, leveraging the wisdom and experience that come with age. Father William planned to create an international network of community projects connected with religious institutions, but open to people of all beliefs who shared values of solidarity and social justice. Richard proposed establishing an ethical investment fund that would direct private resources to sustainable community projects, creating an alternative to traditional natural resource exploitation models. Mrs. Dorothy suggested creating a complete historical archive of the project, documenting not only the successes, but also the mistakes and difficulties faced, so that future initiatives could learn from all the accumulated experience. When they finished planting the saplings, they sat in a circle under the thunder tree for a final reflection on the entire journey. Each shared what they had personally learned during the 10-year project. Daniel spoke about how he had discovered that true leadership doesn't come from position or authority, but from the ability to inspire others to work together for shared goals. Patricia shared that she had learned how education can happen anywhere and at any age, as long as there is openness to learning from real-life experiences. Father William reflected on how genuine spirituality manifests through concrete actions that improve people's lives, not just through words or rituals. Richard confessed that he had learned how personal ambition can be redirected toward collective goals without losing its motivating force, creating far more satisfying results than individual success. Mrs. Dorothy, with the wisdom of her 80 years, observed that she had witnessed how communities can transform when ordinary people decide to work together with perseverance and honesty. The sun was setting when they finally stood up to return to their homes. The surrounding community was illuminated with lights coming from hundreds of prosperous residences, well-equipped schools, modern health clinics, and thriving local businesses. Daniel was the last to leave the monument site. Before leaving, he placed his hand on the trunk of the thunder tree and whispered a final thank you to the friend who had sacrificed his life protecting him. At that moment, a gentle breeze rustled the tree's leaves, almost as if thunder was responding to his gratitude. Daniel smiled and walked toward his home, where his wife and children waited to celebrate another day of a life that had been completely transformed. The community's story would continue to grow in the following years, inspiring thousands of other initiatives around the world. But the heart of it all would always be that moment of pain transformed into hope, when a desperate young man, burying his only friend, discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places. End of story. And you, what did you think of this incredible journey of transformation? Can you imagine how such a painful loss turned into a blessing for an entire community? Daniel showed that honesty and perseverance can overcome any difficulty. Tell us in the comments, do you believe small actions can generate big changes? Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.